In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and video media online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Code Red by E.J. Dionne Jr. It's how progressives and moderates can unite to save our country. This is from the introduction, titled The Opportunity We Dare Not Miss. Will progressives and moderates feud while America burns? Or will these natural allies take advantage of a historic opportunity to strengthen American democracy and defeat an increasingly radical form of conservatism? The choice in our politics is just that stark. This book is offered in a spirit of hope, but with a sense of alarm. My hope is inspired by the broad and principled opposition that Donald Trump's presidency called forth. It is a movement that can and should be the driving force in our politics long after Trump is gone. His abuses of office, his divisiveness, his bigotry, his autocratic habits, and his utter lack of seriousness about the responsibilities of the presidency drew millions of previously disengaged citizens to the public square and the ballot box. The danger he represented inspired young Americans to participate in our public life at unprecedented levels. Tens of thousands of Americans, especially women, have gathered in libraries, diners, and church basements to share wisdom, to organize, and in many cases to run for office themselves. These newly engaged citizens have created an opportunity to build a broad alliance for practical and visionary government, as promising as anything since the Great Depression gave Franklin Roosevelt the chance to build the New Deal coalition. To seize this opening, progressives and moderates must realize that they are allies who have more in common than they sometimes wish to admit. They share a commitment to what public life can achieve and the hope that government can be decent again. They reject the appeals to racism that have been Trump's calling card and the divisiveness at the heart of his electoral strategy. Together, they long for a politics focused on freedom, fairness, and the future. This new politics would be rooted in the economic justice that has always been the left's driving goal, and in the problem-solving approach to government that moderates have long championed. It's true that these camps often battle over whether the nation should seek restoration or transformation in the years after Trump. In fact, our country needs both. To restore the democratic norms we have always valued, we must begin to heal the social and economic wounds that led to Trump's presidency in the first place. Yet there is resistance to common ground among progressives and moderates alike. They often mistrust each other's motives, battle fiercely over tactics, argue over how much change our country needs, and squabble over whether specific policy ideas go too far or not far enough. The moderate says, hey, progressive, you think that if you just lay out the boldest and most ambitious approach to any given problem, the people will rally to your side. Really? For one thing, people may like your objective, but think you're changing things way more than we have to. And we can battle to the death over, say, a Democratic Party platform plank or the first draft of a bill. But without the hard negotiating and compromising that legislative politics requires, a bold idea will remain just a platform plank. That really doesn't do anyone any good. You subject everyone to so many litmus tests, so we might as well be in chemistry class. And God save us from your abuse on Twitter if we disagree with you. You lefties have no idea how to win elections outside of Berkeley or Brooklyn, and some of your ideas are so sweeping that they'll scare potential voters away. At this point, the moderate is likely to wield the sturdy old punchline, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." But hold on, says the progressive. You moderates spend so much time negotiating with yourselves that you compromise away goals and priorities before the real battle even begins. Your ideas get so soggy and complicated that they mobilize no one and mostly put people to sleep. Better to have the courage of your convictions, lay out your hopes plainly and passionately, and inspire voters to join in. Besides, you middle-of-the-roaders were so petrified of Ronald Reagan and the right wing that you caved into the Gipper's economic ideas, let inequality run wild, and gave us a racist and grossly unfair criminal justice system. The extremists have pulled the political center so far right that the only way back to sanity is to show our fellow citizens what a real progressive program looks like. At the risk of sounding like a perhaps unwelcome counselor attempting to ease a family quarrel, I would plead with moderates and progressives to listen to each other carefully. If the events since 2016 do not teach moderates and progressives that they must find ways of working together, nothing will. If they fail to heed each other's advice and take each other's concerns seriously, they will surrender the political system to an increasingly undemocratic right with no interest in any of their shared goals, priorities, and commitments. Moderates are right about the complexity of getting things done in a democracy. Even when the boldest ideas have prevailed, they did so because complex coalitions were built. Important, and it should be said often legitimate, interests were accommodated, and some lesser goals were left by the wayside to be fought for another day. Moderates are also right that democracy requires persuading those who are open to change but worry about how this or that reform might work in practice or affect them personally. Think losing their private health insurance. Disdaining as sellouts, those who raise inconvenient questions or express qualms is not the way to build a majority for reform. Moderates are also right that Americans in large number are tired of politics that involves more yelling than dialogue, more demonizing than understanding. But progressives are right to say that for the last 3 decades, moderates have spent too much time negotiating with themselves. Consider all the effort Democrats put into wooing Republicans by responding to their proposals to amend Obamacare. The book Code Red by E.J. Dionne Jr.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the morning to you. Happy Thursday. I hope you're having a good day today. It is, what an extraordinary time in the life of our nation, you know. You had Rand Paul coming out and saying, oh, you know, those documents, they were planted there by the FBI. And then you got the FBI picture coming out. And what does Trump say? Well, I'm not a slob. I didn't spread those all over the floor. I keep them in boxes. And then his lawyer says, oh, yeah, I've been in his office. He brings guests in there. Like, it's like, you know, give the prosecutors everything they need, right? It's just absolutely amazing. Anyhow, a lot going on today. Of course, it's the last day of Anything Goes Summer. I realize it's September 1st, but I think it's September. Yeah, it is September 1st. But you know, whatever's on your mind, we'll take your calls. And of Anything Goes Summer. There's a possibility Congressman Khanna will call in and take calls today. We'll see what happens. He was scheduled to do so, but he seems to be out of pocket. I'm guessing something's going on in Congress. This is the first time in a couple of years we've not heard from him. So we'll find out. And Dr. Bandy Lee is going to drop by in the second hour. She's the physician and forensic psychiatrist who basically called Donald Trump delusional and Yale went after her. She sued. And anyhow, it's a whole long story, but I have a question for her, which has to do with what's called narcissistic collapse. Narcissistic collapse is when somebody who is suffering from a severe case of narcissistic personality disorder, an actual identifiable DSM-4R, whatever it is these days, maybe it's the 5 now, mental disorder, that when somebody with that is confronted with this narcissistic fantasy world that they've created around themselves, when that fantasy world begins to collapse, what happens? What kind of behavior can we expect from Donald Trump as his world falls apart? Which very much is happening. I have been saying for over a year now, there's not a chance Donald Trump is ever going to be president of the United States again. The big risk, frankly, is not Trump. The big risk is DeSantis or Josh Hawley or one of these other guys who are also fascists, who also don't, well, Rand Paul would never rise to that level, but that kind of person who don't believe in democracy, who do want to realign the United States with Russia, or align the United States with Russia and break our alliance with NATO and diminish our relationship with the European Union, and hook up with dictators and autocrats around the world. That, I think, is the real risk. But it's a fascinating show. In fact, I said Louise and I were talking about this a couple days ago that I think that to a large extent what we're seeing right now is a freak show. That's pretty derogatory. But Donald Trump is this generation's version of O.J. Simpson. Remember when the whole nation for like weeks, the news was all O.J. all the time, and it's like, we were completely obsessed with it. 9/11 was another one of those things, where for weeks and weeks we were completely obsessed with it. Although that one isn't personality driven outside of bin Laden, but the O.J. Simpson one was largely personality driven. You've got a high profile person who is in trouble, and people are forming up opinions on both sides, and hey, it's just made for television. But in the meantime, there's really good stuff going on. And Joe Biden is doing some really good stuff, and Congress is doing some really good stuff, and we're just not talking about that enough. My op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "When Will Americans Again Believe in America?" And after I share this with you, I'll get into, I'll take your phone calls here on Anything Goes Summer. But when will Americans again believe in America? And the headline doesn't really disclose what the article's about. But what the article's about is how Republican philosophy of basically that the only thing government should do is give tax cuts to billionaires and fund the military, that philosophy is destroying this country. That's kind of the bad news. And the good news is that the antithesis of that, the Democratic perspective, is starting to rebuild this country. Now, we've got a lot of challenges. There's still a whole bunch of neoliberals in the Democratic Party and all that, kind of stuff, and, quack, quack, quack. But my article points out that philosophy matters. And philosophy turned into law matters a lot, particularly in this brave new world of climate change. Jackson, Mississippi is coming to your town soon. Whether it's floods or fires, the climate is different now. We are living in a different atmosphere than the atmosphere that humans have been living in for the last couple 100,000 years. Or at least, actually more accurately, the last 5,000 to 10,000 years, since the agricultural revolution, since the end of the last ice age. We're living in a very different climate. And this is just the very leading edge of it. And we need to respond to this, in a serious and full-throated way. This is, if there ever was a time to have government, this idea of we the people, as it says in the preamble of the Constitution, who do things collectively to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility and provide for the general welfare. If there was ever a time we needed that, it's when we're beset by crises. And climate change is a huge one. But what have Republicans been doing? The exact opposite. Here we have 9 of the 10 poorest states in the nation are red states. which should be no surprise. Republicans philosophically have been opposed to unions and the minimum wage since the 1930s. They will tell you. They believe people will only pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they're confronted with the alternative of terrible, grinding poverty. The exception to this, of course, is the children of rich people who must be allowed to inherit every last penny without any horrible death tax. Right? I mean, their logic is so self-serving and so bizarre. You would think that Americans would just see through this, but you still have Republicans going, oh, death tax is a terrible thing, you know. So Texas privatized their electric grid, and what happened? Hundreds of people died in a blackout, and Texans were getting $10,000 electric bills. In 12 Republican-controlled states, people don't have access to Medicaid. You know, the Republican philosophy for low-wage workers, screw you, basically, is their philosophy. Red states have the lowest levels of high school and college graduation generally because, of course, Republicans don't think it's the job of government to educate people. In fact, red states, almost across the board, have the highest rates in the nation of, now get this list, listen carefully, spousal abuse, obesity, smoking, teen pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, abortion, bankruptcies and poverty, homicide and suicide, infant mortality, maternal mortality, forcible rape, robbery and aggravated assault, dropouts from high school, divorce, contaminated air and water, opiate addiction and deaths, unskilled workers, parasitic infections, income and wealth inequality, COVID deaths and unvaccinated people, federal subsidies to states, also known as red state welfare, people on welfare, child poverty, homelessness, spousal murder, unemployment, deaths from auto accidents, and people living on disability. And if you go to the article over at HartmannReport.com, you know, today, it's at the very top, you'll find every single one of those things that I just mentioned. There's a hot link to an article documenting my claim. Every single one of them. And it all comes back to philosophy. And it's not like it's a secret. Ronald Reagan told us this was the new Republican philosophy that he was going to embrace when he was sworn into office on January 20th, 1981, when he said, and I quote, "In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule. The government by an elite group is superior to government by, for, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else?" Question mark. End of quote. In other words, hey, if we can't take care of ourselves, how could we possibly run a government? So let's just do away with the government. This has been the Republican philosophy for 40 years. It's called neoliberalism. And sadly, it was bought into by Bill Clinton and to a smaller extent by Barack Obama, you know, with the end of welfare as we know it and the end of the era of big government. Well, that experiment, that 40-year neoliberal experiment, has not only failed, but it is now ending. And who's ending it? The Democrats. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have kind of woken up from this 40-year sleep and looked back and said, you know, Franklin Roosevelt was right and Ronald Reagan was wrong. And we got to stop this following Ronald Reagan BS and just, you know, and once again reclaim government as a public good, as a good thing, as an important thing. Thankfully, the Democratic Party has figured this out. But the bottom line is now we've got climate change coming after us. You know, before the last couple of years, and it's just gotten so obvious in the last 2 years. You know, we had a 116-degree summer last year here in Portland. It's going to be 124 degrees in California today. You've got, you know, Jackson, Mississippi underwater because of an epic flood, Kentucky 2 weeks ago. It's just happening all over the country. Wildfires are going to be the new norm, and not just in the West. This drying out, the great drying out is happening across the Rocky Mountain states and the Midwest, and fires and things like this. So what we're seeing now, as a consequence of our changing climate, is that we can't afford this Republican philosophy anymore. Prior to the era of climate change, this whole Republican philosophy was something that, you know, we could argue about, we could fight over. You know, it screwed the students. You know, we've got a student debt crisis. We've got You know, a lot of people don't have, you know, in 12 Republican-controlled states, people don't have access to Medicaid. They don't have health insurance. There's, you know, kids are not getting decent educations. We don't teach civics anymore. Quack, 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 right? Obviously, a lot of problems from the Republican philosophy. And prior to climate change, we could, like, bear that. We could endure it. But now we really have to pull together. Now we really need government. And we can't afford any longer a philosophy that says that government is a fundamental evil. We have to embrace government as a fundamental good and make it work that way. Republicans always try to sabotage government whenever they get control of it. You know, like Trump laying off 20% of the IRS and 20% of the Social Security Administration so that those agencies wouldn't work well. We can't afford to do that anymore. So anyhow, that's my rant. It's over at HartmannReport.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I'll pick up your calls right after this. It's 18 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Sean in Stamford, Connecticut. Hey, Sean, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Well, today I figured since it was the last day for the holiday, I thought I'd tell you a political joke I came across that I think you might enjoy.
Go for it.
So, okay. So President Trump, President Obama, and President Bush Jr. all meet God for the first time. And God says to President Bush Jr., "What do you believe in?" And he says, "Well, I believe that all Americans should be free of unnecessary regulation." And God says, "Very well, you set my right." He turns to President Obama and says, "What do you believe in?" And Obama says to God, "I believe that all Americans have affordable and accessible health care." God says, "Very well, you sit on my left." Finally, Trump turns to God, and God says to him, "What do you believe in?" And Trump turns to God again, and he says, "Well, I believe you're sitting in my seat."
I believe what?
I believe you're sitting in my seat.
Oh, you're sitting in my seat. Okay, good one. All right, thank you, Sean. Our joke for
You're welcome.
Yeah, I needed that. Thank you very much. You can't laugh too hard. My back is starting to hurt. Curtis in Austin, Texas. Which is it, Curtis?
Curtis, I'm actually in Taylor, Texas.
Taylor, Texas. Okay, I'll fix this. Tyler, Tyler, or Tay?
Taylor.
Okay, you got it. Taylor, Texas. What's up, Curtis?
Yes, I have a question for you, Tom, and maybe you have an answer or maybe you don't. With all the Republicans that make these outlandish threats toward toward Democrats and politicians at hand, you know, if a kid calls a school or you call a business and tell them you're going to bomb them or you're going to come create physical harm to them, you know, the law enforcement will come to your house and pick you up. But why is it allowed for these Republican politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these other ones that make these asinine threats toward politicians that they don't suffer any kind of consequences?
Right. Like Lindsey Graham saying that, you know, white people are going to riot if Donald Trump is
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there is an easy answer to that, Curtis, and that is that public officials have arguably a lot more leeway in the things that they're saying. And there's an actual and real difference between predicting riots and calling a school, you know, calling in a bomb threat to a school or something like that. I mean, you know, there is a distinction there.
Yes,
but I get your point. It's a threat to the public. It's a threat to the public safety, and as such, at least should be called out. I don't know if you caught it, but Lindsey Graham has walked back his comments.
Oh, yeah. I was watching Lawrence O'Donnell the other night, and I think he did a wonderful piece on that. Yeah. And I just think that, you know, these guys are just flat-out cowards that, you know, say these things, but, you know, they're they'll be the first ones to run for cover and look for protection of the law enforcement when it all goes down.
Oh, I don't recall any of those Republicans running out to meet the protesters on January 6th. Do you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, Tom, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Curtis. Great talking with you. I appreciate the call. We'll be right back. It is, 22 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Jessica Valenti publishes a newsletter called All in Her Head over at Substack.com, and just has an amazing compilation of bizarre Republican statements about rape and abortion. Michigan Governor Garrett Soldano earlier this year said that there should be no exceptions for rape in the abortion laws because the next fetus might be the next president. Missouri State Representative Barry Hovis said that most sexual assaults are actually consensual rapes. Texas Republican Representative Michael Burgess says that we should ban abortion because if you watch a sonogram, they have movements that are purposeful. If they're a male baby, they have their hand between their legs. They feel pleasure. That's right. Women should be legally banned from getting an abortion so that their male fetuses can masturbate, writes Jessica Valenti. It's absolutely bizarre. Idaho Republican Vito Barberi says you can do a gynecological exam by swallowing a camera. What planet do these people live on? A whole list of them is on a video over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. 24 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Hey, we just heard from Congressman Khanna's office, and yes, indeed, there was wild stuff going on, but he is going to drop by in about 7-8 minutes at the bottom of the hour, and he's going to be taking calls. We're going to do a national progressive town hall meeting here from the bottom of this hour here on the West Coast. It'll be 9:30. It'll be 12:30, I guess, on the East Coast. For an hour. So we'll take the last half hour of this hour and the first half hour of the next hour, and then we're going to bump Dr. Bandy Lee down to what will be 10:30, Pacific time. So just FYI, and when we hit the break here, Louise will go through and make sure that your call is something that is appropriate for that you have a question, or you can convert your question into one for Congressman Khanna. Let's put it that way. Les in Winnemucca, Nevada. Hey, Les, what's on your mind today?
For taking my call.
Sure. Hey, Les.
I just wanted to say, I think the news media is trying to miss it on Trump. I hear him say stuff like, well, did he believe that was okay, or did he think that, it went that way? And they're missing the whole thing. It's all projection. It's all a con. There's never a minute that it's not con. When he tells the truth, it's because it fits the con. The con is try to stay in office so they won't come after him. I don't know if he stole secrets, was trying to sell them to somebody or something. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Well, let the courts figure it out. But whenever he says that those guys are doing this, you can bet that somewhere he's doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's all...
Yeah. Oh, he's I mean, you remember when Trump was, lock up Hillary because she mishandled classified documents? I mean, that aged well, right? It's crazy.
Well, he knows he should be locked up.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And deep down inside, Donald Trump has known that his entire life.
He's been a career criminal. I've been watching since 1972.
Yeah.
I'm your age, man.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, I'm with you, Les. Les, thank you very much. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. If you're on hold, convert your question to something for the congressman or come up with one. And if you don't have one, hang up and let somebody call in who does want to ask a question of Congressman Khanna, because we're going to do an hour-long progressive town hall meeting right after this break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with Congressman Khanna in just a moment.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Code Red by E.J. Dionne Jr. It's how progressives and moderates can unite to save our country. This is from the introduction, titled The Opportunity We Dare Not. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Hannah Arendt's book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. And I've, known about this book, read little pieces of it for decades. I mean, it's the classic work on totalitarianism. It's long and there's a lot of words in it, but for this moment, Elliot Lustig was tweeting recently about Donald Trump. This is back when Donald Trump was talking about 3 to 5 million illegal immigrants voting, right? And he said, Hannah Arendt, in her book, The Origin of Totalitarianism, provides a helpful guide for interpreting the language of fascists. She noted how decent liberals of 1930s Germany would fact-check the Nazis' bizarre claims about things like Jews as if they were meant to be factual. What they failed to understand, Arendt suggests, is that the Nazi Jew-hating was not a statement of fact, but a declaration of intent. So when someone would blame the Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I, naive people would counter by saying, there's no evidence of that. What the Nazis were doing was not describing what was true, but what would have to be true in order to justify what they planned to do next. So did 3 million illegals cast vote in the election? Clearly not, but fact-checking is just a way of playing along with their game. What Trump is saying is not that 3 million illegals voted. What he's saying is, I'm going to steal the voting rights of millions of Americans. So that's kind of a contemporary frame for this book. So let's read from the book itself. Here, this is from page 348. And she's talking about totalitarian movements and how they use propaganda, how they communicate with the public, and the difference between terror and propaganda, the kind of terror that they can inculcate by just kind of randomly arresting people. Pretty much everybody's committed some kind of crime at some point, right? Arresting people, and on the one hand, that's the terror, or convincing the people. These totalitarian movements use socialism and racism by emptying them of their utilitarian content, the interests of a class or a nation. The form of infallible protection in which these concepts were presented has become more important than their content. The chief qualification of a mass leader has become unending infallibility. He can never admit an error. The assumption of infallibility, moreover, is based not so much on superior intelligence as on the correct interpretation of the essentially reliable forces in history and nature, forces which neither defeat nor ruin can prove wrong because they're bound to assert themselves in the long run. Mass leaders in power have one concern which overrides all utilitarian consideration: to make their predictions come true. The Nazis did not hesitate to use, at the end of the war, the concentrated force of their still intact organization to bring about as complete a destruction of Germany as possible, in order to make true their prediction that the German people would be ruined in case of defeat. The propaganda effect of infallibility, the striking success of posing as a mere interpreting agent of predictable forces, has encouraged in totalitarian dictators the habit of announcing their political intentions in the form of prophecy. The most famous example is Hitler's announcement to the German Reichstag in January 1939, quote, "I want today once again to make a prophecy. In case the Jewish financiers succeed one more in hurling the people into a world war, the result will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe," end of quote. Translated into non-totalitarian language, this means, I intend to make war and I intend to kill the Jews of Europe. Similarly, Stalin, in the great speech before the Central Committee of the Communist Party in 1930, in which he prepared the physical liquidation of intra-party right and left deviationists, described them as representatives of dying classes. This definition not only gave the argument its specific sharpness, but also announced in totalitarian style the physical destruction of those whose dying out had just been prophesied. In both instances, the same objective is accomplished. The liquidation is fitted into a historical process in which man not only suffers, or does or suffers what, according to some immutable law, is bound to happen anyway. As soon as the execution of the victims has been carried out, the prophecy becomes a retrospective alibi. Nothing happened but what has already been predicted. It does not matter whether the laws of history spell the doom of the classes and their representatives, or whether the laws of nature exterminate all those elements, democracies, Jews, Eastern subhumans, the Untermenschen, or the incurably sick. They are not fit to live anyway. Incidentally, Hitler, too, spoke of dying classes that ought to be, quote, eliminated without much ado, end quote. This method, like other totalitarian propaganda methods, is foolproof only after the movements have seized power. Then all debate about the truth or falsity of a totalitarian dictator's prediction is as weird as arguing with a potential murderer about whether his future victim is dead or alive, since by killing the person in question, the murderer can provide prompt proof of the correctness of his statement. The only valid argument under such conditions is promptly to rescue the person whose death has been predicted. Before mass leaders seize the power to fit reality to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts as such, for, in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of the man who can fabricate it. The assertion that the Moscow subway is the only one in the world is a lie only so long as the Bolsheviks have not the power to destroy all the others. In other words, the method of infallible prediction, more than any other totalitarian propaganda device, works. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. And welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour, and Congressman Khanna is on the line with us. We're going to do a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. He's co-chair of the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives, and just an all-around great guy. One of our progressive superstars. I'm so pleased and honored to have him on the program. Congressman, welcome back.
Tom, it's great to be back on. It's a delight. You know, I've been meeting all your listeners as I've been across the country. It's impressive. You got listeners in almost every state.
I suspect, you know, there's especially with Sirius XM and Free Speech TV, we've got a pretty good throw. Just a real quick question: you're here with us for the next hour, or for a half hour until the top of the hour?
I could do either. Whatever works.
We would love to have you for an hour. I mean, let's do this right, because you know people are all stacked up. Okay,
let's do it.
So great. Okay, so we'll go from 9:30 Pacific to 10:30 Pacific. All right. So anything on your mind, or you want to just jump right in and pick up phone calls?
Let's jump in. I mean, obviously, a lot has gotten done over the last few weeks. Student loan forgiveness with the president, largest climate investment, the CHIPS bill with bringing manufacturing back for semiconductors. So finally, it seems like we've gotten our act together and are delivering, and we've got quite a lot of momentum headed into the midterms.
Amen. Amen. All righty, let's pick up some phone calls here. John in Minneapolis, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yeah, I just have two quick questions. I'm still very interested in Medicare for all, and, you know, having that paid for by the taxpayers, all of us together, to support health care. I would like to see insurance companies out of the picture, and drug companies. We need to negotiate prices, and I don't see any of this happening until we really get money out of politics. I think that really is what holds up all of this. But, you know, that's what I'm still interested in that, and I would say that most people are. And also the quality of medical care is not really where it should be, and I don't really see that we have appropriate institutions that really monitor what these private healthcare institutions are doing. In my experience, you know, and I am a retired healthcare person, they're really not giving good care overall.
Well, John, I agree with all of your points. I mean, we need Medicare for all. The reason we don't have it is because of private insurance and their lobbying efforts. We should start by at least expanding Medicare to 60 to 55, including dental, vision, hearing. And we need to have Medicare negotiate for prescription drugs. Now, the bill does that at least for Medicare, but it doesn't do that, allowing them to negotiate for a lot of the private insurance. So we have a lot of work to do, and the big pharma lobby and insurance lobby is who we're confronting.
Cool. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
The reason we don't have it is because
Susan?
private insurance and they're lobbying.
Susan, you have to be listening to your phone, not your TV. I'm sorry. Linda in Waco, Texas, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi. I'm very concerned that the Trumpster is going to incite a civil war in this country to distract from his legal entanglements and to gain power and control, even if he's incarcerated, and in fact, even more if he's incarcerated. And I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that and what we could do to stop that.
I am very concerned. I share your fear that Trump is trying to incite violence, polarization, and we need politicians to be lowering the temperature to make sure that we're calling out anyone who is encouraging threats or violence. But ultimately, I support Merrick Garland in following the law. I mean, we can't be intimidated because of a fear of a reaction and say, okay, we don't have to follow the law. We need to follow the law and then call for responsibility among elected officials to condemn violence and threats of violence.
Rich in Cedro Woolley, Washington, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Good morning. Yeah, there's on the left.
Rich, your phone is breaking up really, really badly. I'm going to put you on hold, and you can talk to Louise, and we'll see if we can get a better connection for you. Lee in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the support with the student loan breakthrough that we had, but I was wondering if there's going to be any meaningful reforms, understanding what was done is most likely the best that could be obtained for relief, but the interest rate and reality of these plus loans, the 8.5% interest rate, non-negotiable, can't consolidate, and now that there is literally no Department of Education, it's been completely gutted by DeVos. Every time you call, you're forwarded a third-party corporation who are trying to pressure you to do a specific type of consolidation that will somehow magically cure everything. But first of all, that doesn't address...
So your question, Lee, is what?
What meaningful reforms are possible or will...
So your question is, can we get meaningful reforms to student loans?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, thanks. The first thing is we've had a significant step here with $10,000 being forgiven and up to $20,000 for those on Pell Grants, plus a cap of not being required more than 5% of your student loans. I took out over $100,000 of loans. I was fortunate to pay them back, but it's outrageous, $30,000, $40,000. But I think we have to go further. We need to forgive up to $50,000. We need to allow for refinancing of student loans at lower interest rates, just like you can on a mortgage. So I agree with you. It's a first step, but we've got more work to do. And
allow them to be included in bankruptcies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so your credit isn't ruined. I mean, that's the total irony here is the Republicans are saying, oh, this is going to cause inflation. No, it's not. A lot of these loans weren't being repaid anyway. What was happening is people's credit was being destroyed, and this is going to prevent that forgiveness from that happening.
Right. Robert in Georgia. What city in Georgia are you in, Robert?
Marietta.
Marietta, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello, Mr. Khanna, Representative Khanna. I have a suggestion for making elections incorruptible so we don't have to go through this ever again with Trump. And it seems like it would be simple because if you give every machine in the country a 5 alphanumeric character ID. And the first character would indicate the state it's in, the second one would indicate the congressional district, and the third one would indicate the voting location within the district, and then the other two would be a combination of two of them to do the specific machine within that location. And then when you get in the machine to vote, you put in a 5-digit number, and as long as it's unique to that machine, it'll accept it. It's with 100,000 options on each machine.
Okay, so you're looking for ways to make voting more secure or deal with voting machines, Congressman?
Well, look, I'm for sensible reforms. I'm also for paper ballots, whatever can verify the vote. But my concern is less that they're going to manipulate all the voting machines and more that they're going to manipulate the Secretary of States to close down ballot boxes, to overturn local elections officials who are counting the votes, to try to put a slate in that's anti-democratic. And that is why it's so concerning what they're doing in a state-by-state basis and why we need the Electoral Count Reform Act to pass to prevent those kind of shenanigans.
Very quickly, what's the status of that legislation?
It should, if it's going to go through, it's going to go through in the lame duck. And, you know, I'm hoping that people like McConnell will realize it's not in their own interest to have Donald Trump try to steal the 2024 election, and will pass that, which would trigger automatic judicial review if any state tries to go against the popular vote in their state. And it's a scary thought that a conservative Supreme Court may be what holds our democracy together, but at least they're better than some of these state legislatures.
Yeah, there you go. Wesley in Gainesville, Florida, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Good morning. I'm a little confused about the EV tax credit. Based on some of my research, it looks like because I'm a retired person, I do not have much taxable income, so I wouldn't get the $7,500. Now, I know I can wait until 2023 and let the dealer get the $7,500, but it's very confusing to me. So anything you could help would be appreciated.
Well, we've lifted under the Inflation Reduction Act the cap, so now you can use the electric vehicle tax credit, whatever car you want to buy, as long as it's a American company. And it applies for folks up to the middle and even upper middle class. So as long as you're in the middle or upper middle class, you can get one of those tax credits.
That's great. It is, we're coming up on 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be in just a second. Congressman Khanna is with us for the hour, this half hour, the first half hour of the next hour, taking your calls in a national progressive town hall meeting. Got callers on the line from North Carolina, Indiana, Idaho, California, Iowa, all over the country. We'll be picking up your calls right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls for Representative Khanna. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Khanna. And welcome back. Carol in Spirit Lake, Iowa. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yes, I am a pro-choice woman who would not choose to have an abortion, but resent the fact that women are made to support and care for these children. And the men, as far as I can tell, are not held to any responsibility. Is there any kind of law or discussion of this problem in Congress?
Well, first of all, you're right. I mean, we're basically post-Roe in a Dobbs role requiring forced pregnancy. And that is not just a violation of freedom. It's a violation of equality. It's posing a burden on women that we don't impose on men. And if the Republicans were really for families, they would start to do things like support a child tax credit that is necessary. They would support universal preschool, would support child care. So at the very least, we should have a pro-family agenda, but they're not. And that's because this is more about controlling women than it is about being pro-life for young children.
Joe in Cupertino, California, you are on the air with your congressman.
Congressman Khanna, I really appreciate all you do. We're here in town. I really saw the parade. I thought that was great. I wanted to cut it short. The Coast Guard can't get fuel in the Solomon Islands because of some agreement with China and the Solomon Islands. We are so far abroad. I wonder if we can start bringing the troops home and reduce, some of the spending that's going on at the Pentagon. I really think since you're sitting on armed services, we could bring some of this stuff home. We have the United States military, and then we have the Department of Homeland Security abroad in every other part of the world. Can we bring them back to the United States so they can do their jobs here? That's my.
Well, Joe, I agree that we have to look at our footprint around the world and see whether all our bases are as necessary. I mean, there's some which are, of course, needed for our strategic interests and security, but we are deployed extensively, and it's at a large cost. The defense budget is approaching $1 trillion, more than half of discretionary spending. As you know, I've opposed those defense increases, and I think we can keep our country safe without the vast majority that we're spending, and I'm open to looking at reducing the global footprint.
Congressman, we just have 42 seconds. I'm curious your thoughts on China's belligerence with regard to Taiwan and just in general. It's turning into a fairly risky world right now. Your thoughts?
Well, it is. And I met with the Chinese ambassador, and here's what I said. I said one of the causes of the Opium War, even though Britain was wrong to invade, was the structural trade deficits. China at the time was unwilling to buy British wool. And I said, if we want to lower tensions and reduce risk, we need to rebalance production. We can't have these trade deficits. So rebuilding our industrial base, making us less dependent on Taiwan and Asia, having more parity in production in China and the U.S. is one of the best things we can do to reduce the tensions and avoid another Cold War.
That is brilliant. That makes so much sense. Congressman Khanna with us for the hour, taking your calls. Here on the Thom Hartmann Program, it's a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Khanna, and it's a Twitter feed definitely worth following, by the way. We will be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna in 60 seconds. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Back during World War I under President Wilson, we had a windfall profits tax on war profiteers, essentially, of 95% above their normal profits. You were allowed to make your normal profits, but when you started making more than that, 95% tax on that income. President Franklin Roosevelt revisited the exact same thing, windfall profits tax, during World War II, saying he didn't want this war to produce any new war millionaires. During the Korean War, Dwight Eisenhower had a windfall profits tax. During the echo of the fall of the Shah of Iran, when all the Iranian oil was taken off the marketplace and the price spiked, President Ronald Reagan imposed a windfall profits tax on the oil and gas industry to stop exploitation of that. Now we have Senator Bernie Sanders in the Senate and Ed Markey as well along with him, and Representative Jamal Bowman in the House saying, let's do the same thing now. There's a whole video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back, Congressman Khanna, taking your calls for the hour, and Ronald in Gary, Indiana. Ronald, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thank you for taking my call, Tom. Representative Khanna, I just got two questions. Because of the last president and what he had done, has anyone proposed a bill to limit the number of presidential pardons? Also, I see that Leonard Leo, the billionaire, has pumped over $1 billion into the right-wing conservative movement. Will this hurt us, and will it move the conservative movement along? Will it move them along?
Well, your idea of limiting pardons is a good one. The challenge is that the pardon power is in the Constitution, but there have to be some limits on it because there are parts of the Constitution also that don't allow the a president to be corrupt or self-interested. And so that needs to be challenged in the courts, and there should be some restriction on the pardoning power. On the billionaire who's throwing money in, I mean, this is what we're up against. We're going to be outspent in November. We've got tons of special interest money against us. They don't like what we're doing to start standing up for the working and middle class again, and it's a big fight, and that fight has always been the case where the special interest money is on the conservative side.
Bob, in Raleigh, North Carolina, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello, thanks for taking my call. My question, it's kind of a two-part question. As I understand, Justice Alito says the Constitution does not explicitly grant our privacy, but our Declaration of Independence says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think that liberty and freedom are synonymous, and that you cannot have freedom if we don't have privacy. So our elected officials swear to defend the Constitution. Actually, first I'd like to get your thought on that. And then our elected officials swear to defend the Constitution. Does that include the Declaration of Independence, where that life, liberty, and freedom is at? And that's my question. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, obviously, we're pledging to support the Constitution, and Constitution is based on principles of the Declaration, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness being key principles. And I believe that a lot of the progressive agenda is an agenda of promoting freedom and liberty, the freedom to be able to get health care, the freedom to get an education, the freedom that enables to live a productive life. So a lot of what we're doing is standing up for freedom and liberty.
Susan in Caldwell, Idaho, you are on the Idaho. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna, and we're down to about a minute and a half here.
Hi, Congressman. I just wonder if you have any ideas how the Democratic Party can pierce the right-wing media stranglehold on areas like mine in southern Idaho. All our media are playing Hannity and Ben Shapiro, and the local guys do the same script. Do you have any ideas?
Susan, it's very difficult. I would say two things. One, we need to, on the left, invest more in radio, in newspapers, in forms of communication that the right has been doing for 40 years. And two, we need to show up. We need to have people showing up in Idaho, in towns, to get our side of the story out.
Rich in Central Woolley, Washington. We have 1 minute. Rich, you got a quick one?
Yeah. Is the executive branch able to execute the fossil fuel giveaways in such a way that they prioritize the green fuel, say like the leases for solar farms and wind farms, prioritize those over, say, leases for the fossil fuel industry?
Yes, I mean one of the things I didn't like about the Inflation Reduction Act is it requires fossil fuel sales for every renewable sale. That was a compromise that had to be made with Manchin. But the sale does not mean permitting. And right now we're litigating the issue of permitting. I have said that I completely oppose this idea that you're going to have permitting reform for fossil fuel projects. I'm open to expediting permitting for clean energy projects. And that is what the environmental community is fighting for right now, so that we don't have permitting reform that's going to ride roughshod over frontline communities and have new fossil fuel projects there.
Congressman, we have 45 seconds. I mistimed. I'm sorry. I said we had 1 minute. We had two, but we're it's too short to get one more caller in here before the break. Where do you think that? I mean, we've got a good start here. There's the first major piece of legislation in American history on climate change. What's next?
Well, we need to keep going. I mean, China is producing 150 battery plants. They have 70% of the electric vehicle market. We have a few percent. They have 70% of the solar market. So we've got, yes, this is a step with tax incentives, but I believe we need purchase agreements. We need financing. We need to set bold goals. Let's have a goal of saying a third. We should have a third of electric vehicle market share by the end of the decade.
There you go. Congressman Khanna with us for the hour. We'll be back on the other side of this break here at the top of the hour with another half hour of Congressman Khanna taking your calls. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 17th District of California. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Khanna. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna right after the news here, or whatever it may be, at the top of the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stokely, A Life by Peniel E. Joseph. This is from the preface. Stokely Carmichael is a troubling icon of America's civil rights years. His Black Power call became a national Rorschach test. Whereas many blacks viewed it as righteous, many whites saw violent foreboding. Newspapers brooded over Carmichael's words, quickly forming a consensus that judged the slogan to be at best intemperate and at worst a blatant call for anti-white violence and reverse racism. In 1966, Black Power reverberated around the world, galvanizing blacks, outraging whites, and inspiring a cross-section of ethnic and racial minorities. In 1969, Carmichael left the United States for Conakry, Guinea, where he reinvented himself as a roving Pan-Africanist organizer and professional revolutionary. For the next 30 years, he remained an energetic dissident, a throwback to the heady years of the 1960s. Carmichael turned the quest for black political power into his life's work. His faith in a style of politics many considered anachronistic came out of the same tenacity and stubbornness that once made him one of the most effective and controversial activists of his generation. These same qualities, however, limited Carmichael's efforts as a Pan-Africanist political mobilizer. Before leaving America, Stokely resigned as Black Power's glamorous enfant terrible. Telegenic, brash, equal parts angry and gregarious. Whether dressed in three-piece suits, leather jackets, sharecroppers' overhauls, or African dashikis, Carmichael became to represent the era's multifaceted identity, a hipster hero whose easy grace allowed him to consort effortlessly with both the dignified and the damned. The name Stokely Carmichael first came into my consciousness when I was a young boy coming of age in New York City. As the proud son of a Haitian mother who belonged to local 1199 Hospital Workers Union, part of SEIU, I grew up hearing stories of how civil rights activists, Black Power revolutionaries, Pan-Africanist freedom fighters, and trade unionists helped to shape a new world in America and beyond. By the time I was in elementary school, I was on my first picket line, accompanying my mother in support of an 1199 strike. Both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King supported 1199 during the 1960s. Stokely Carmichael's political importance came into sharper focus when I was in junior high after the premiere of the landmark PBS documentary series Eyes on the Prize, which featured the 24-year-old Carmichael's fiery Black Power speech and rightly characterized Stokely as his generation's heir to Malcolm X. Over the course of a decade of research on Carmichael, I would come to understand him as that and much more. Carmichael's youth, casual dress, and charisma made him an easily identifiable hero, one whose quick smile and passionate speeches left an indelible impression. An adopted son of the South by way of Trinidad, the Bronx, and Harlem, Stokely adapted to while transforming whatever environment he encountered. As a native New Yorker growing up in the city's tense racial climate of the 1980s, I found Carmichael's survival instincts appealing. As a young graduate student in Philadelphia, I had the opportunity to hear him speak and briefly met him afterward. He encouraged me to stay committed to the Black freedom movement, a struggle he defined as infinite. With his flowing African robes, gray hair, and white beard, he looked like a prince. And he had changed his name. He was no longer Stokely Carmichael. As Malcolm Little had become Malcolm X and later El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Stokely had become Kwame Ture. It was a name that paid homage to his two African heroes, men who had been the first presidents of their countries, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Guinea's Sekou Touré. Kwame Ture spelled the Guinean's name not as the French did, as white Europeans did, but as Arabs and Muslims did. Sekou Touré, S-E-K-U-T-U-R-E. As a college student, Carmichael helped transform America by organizing sit-ins, demonstrations, and voter registrations during the Civil Rights Movement's heroic years, a period that roughly encompasses the decade between the 1954 Brown v. Board Supreme Court decision, desegregation decision, and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and has become enshrined in public memory through national holidays, films, commemorations, and monuments. Carmichael's deep sense of justice contributed to his evolution into Kwame Ture, the Pan-Africanist revolutionary and anti-capitalist organizer who moved to West Africa and remained tenacious in the face of searing political setbacks. Carmichael ultimately judged America incapable of creating the free and just world he had struggled for as a young man. But despite living in Africa for the final 30 years of his life, Carmichael's legendary stature as a Black Power activist lingered even if many ignored his lasting contributions to civil rights struggles that included a bruising quest for the vote in the Deep South. Although today largely forgotten, Stokely Carmichael remains one of the protean figures of the 20th century, a revolutionary who passionately believed in self-defense and armed rebellion, even as he revered nonviolence. The book Stokely, A Life, by Peniel L. Joseph.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Congressman Khanna is on the line with us for the next half hour, taking your calls in a National Progressive Town Hall meeting, part two. And Congressman Khanna, you're still here with us?
I am.
Okay. Dwayne in Sacramento, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
How y'all doing?
Good. What's your question, Dwayne?
My question is, why does the government, our government, keep on doing these bills for corporations where there's no stipulations on paying back the taxpayers' money that they take? And like bringing over these chip companies, as Bernie Sanders was talking about, putting stuff in the bill to where they won't stop unions, they won't move again. Over 780 factories that we used to have here moved out because of less labor cost. And now they want the taxpayer to build here and keep on giving to these big corporations, but they don't give nothing back.
Yeah, got it. It was 60,000 factories, by the way, Dwayne. But Congressman?
Dwayne, you're absolutely right to point out this concern. Bernie Sanders was right to point out the concern. Look, I led the CHIPS Act. I'm proud of it, but we pushed it to get legislatively that they would never be able to use the money on stock buybacks, that they would be committed to keeping those manufacturing plants here, that they would require buying American products on the supply chain. We were unable to secure that legislatively, but we did get the administration's commitment to enforce that in how they would distribute the money, and some of the companies' commitment to make sure that they were committed to building those factories in the United States. But on a broader perspective, I agree with you that it's fine to have government purchasing, government financing to assist industry, but there have to be public standards, including labor standards and commitment to keeping those businesses in the United States.
Ray in Costa Mesa, California, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Good day, gentlemen. How are you today?
Good. What's your question?
Hey, I've noticed a lot of our issues, in my opinion, seem to go back to the lack of civics, of knowledge of civics, of how our country is supposed to operate and function. And I'm trying to think that the best way to enlighten our public, as my children were never taught civics in school, what they learned is what I taught them. The fundamental basis of how the government works, 3 branches of government, rule of law, and following the law. Any chance the president is going to give us a civics lesson today?
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Congressman, if you don't mind my jumping in here for a moment, this is one of my hobby horses. Reagan put Bill Bennett in charge of the Department of Education, and my understanding is that Bill Bennett basically ended federal support for civics education. The rationale was we need to focus on science and math. And Bill Bennett, I mean, if you want to get an understanding of this guy's worldview, this is just a little 20-second clip of Bill Bennett himself, our education secretary, who still stands behind these statements, by the way. He's still alive.
But I do know that it's true that if you wanted to reduce crime, you could, if that were your sole purpose, you could abort every black baby in this country and your crime rate would go down. That would be an impossible, ridiculous, and morally reprehensible thing to do. But your crime rate would go down.
That's the guy that Reagan put in charge of our education policies. Congressman.
Well, Bill Bennett had some of the most destructive impacts on this country. What I've never understood is why Republicans wouldn't be for civic education. I mean, if you care about patriotism, if you care about understanding our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, you'd want people to learn about that and learn about that in public schools. And so I do think the president is going to talk about some of those founding principles of our country. He's going to talk about how the stakes now aren't just Democrat, Republican, but really the very principles of the rule of law and our democratic way of life. And I expect that many people are going to rally around the president's message because they are tired of the arrogance and cavalier attitude that Trump and others around him have displayed towards the rule of law.
Charles in Santa Monica, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I'm sorry that I really appreciate everything that's happening now in Washington on the Democratic Party side, but I have to say that, including the president's foreign policy addresses and so on, I understand you can't really outrun the public that far. But if we don't get past this idea of this trying to preserve the disparity in these hegemon conflicts between the Western neoliberal American European model, the Chinese, Russian, and the rising BRICS countries, this is going to consume all the air in the room, and we'll never be able to address climate change to find the cooperation to solve that issue. And the idea that we can.
So what's your question for the congressman, Charles?
We need a new policy. Do you see this kind of understanding turning into any pressure on the president to come out with something that's more cooperative in the international sphere?
Okay, great. Got it. Thank you.
Well, I think the president does want to cooperate on climate change. The president does want to cooperate on pandemics. The challenge is when you have Putin marching into Ukraine unprovoked and trying to take up sovereign territory, what choice is there but for the president to support Ukraine in standing up for their own sovereignty? And I think the president's done a terrific job on that while pursuing diplomacy. If Putin agreed to a ceasefire tomorrow, we would be very happy with that outcome. But and if Putin agreed to leave Ukraine as a sovereign territory, and same thing with China, as long as they are committed to peace and not a military takeover of Taiwan, we are committed to a one China policy.
Dennis in Janesville, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thank you for taking my call. My name is Dennis Graham, 608-290.
No, don't do that, Dennis. You don't want to put your phone number out. Go. What's your question?
I don't give. No, really. Anybody who cares about climate change, I screamed myself hoarse over this 15 years ago.
Okay, what's your question for the congressman?
Look up in.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dennis. We're not going to go there. Christian in Redding, California. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yes, sir. Thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for your service to the citizens of America. Congressperson, I have a question for you. I'm calling from CA Congressional District 1 in California, where we are being drowned by insurrectionist Doug LaMotha. We have an excellent candidate, endorsed by the CA party, and we need your help, sir. If we provide you with expense and accommodation, would you come up and campaign for Max Steiner to take Doug LaMotha's seat? Very simple question.
I'm happy to look at doing that. I mean, I've been all over the state trying to campaign for candidates in the south of the state, Jay Chen and Rudy Salazar and others, and I'm happy to come up, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Richard in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello?
Hey, you're on the air, Richard.
Okay, sorry. My name is Richard, and I'm calling to ask what the Democrats in Congress are going to do to stop the dirty deal that Schumer made with Manchin that's basically going to gut our environmental rules and ensure more fossil fuel investment.
You're talking the Cummings side deal, Congressman?
Well, I'm glad you raised that because I had a long interview with Bill McKibben, the great environmental leader who started 350.org, and I said I will be vocally opposing it. I've signed a letter with Grijalva telling the speaker that she shouldn't bring that side deal for a vote. I chair the Environment Subcommittee, and we're going to be having a hearing on September 15th on this issue. So we are doing everything to oppose this side deal.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. Congressman Ro Khanna will be with us for the next 10 or 15 minutes here, taking your calls in the second half of our National Progressive Town Hall meeting with Congressman Ro Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing California's 17th District in the U.S. House. His website, Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Ro Khanna.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Khanna. Stick around. And welcome back. Justin in West Hills, California. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Congressman, thank you so much for taking my call. I wanted to talk about an issue that's become a mainstream issue, which is cannabis in America. And my question is nothing to do about legalization because, honestly, I don't think that will ever get passed with our current state of Senate and House. My question is really simple. Do you support or Do you support changing cannabis to a Schedule II drug, or even less than that? It just should not be a Schedule I. And my question also is regarding this, what's going on with the classification of cannabis as a Schedule I drug. The Biden DOJ is fighting medical marijuana patients who want to have the right to purchase a gun. Nikki Fried, who's the Democratic Agriculture Commissioner, she filed a suit for the right of medical patients to be able to own a gun in their home. I am in California. I'm an MMIC patient. I would love to be able to purchase a gun at my home so I can feel safe at my home and be a responsible gun owner just like everybody else in America. I don't understand why the Biden DOJ is going after medical patients' right to purchase a gun. And I'd love to know if you support this position by the DOJ.
So the first question was on the legalization of cannabis, and I agree that cannabis should not be part of Schedule I, and I've supported the legalization. The second question, I mean, I'd have to look into the details. I mean, obviously, I support the Second Amendment, but I think that there have to be reasonable restrictions so that someone who's going to do harm doesn't get their hands on guns, and I'd have to look at what the Biden administration is doing in the specifics you raised.
Ryan in Sebastopol, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, guys. Thanks for everything you do. My question for Rep. Khanna is, since we've allowed money to talk in our government, is there any way we could put a price tag on what a vote is worth that would allow anyone wrongfully or illegally thrown off voter rolls to sue their state for that amount? And secondly, is there anything stopping an administration from forcing a nationwide vote on eliminating money from politics?
That's a great question. There's no punishment when they purge these people.
You know, I like that idea, actually. I think there should be a civil right of action. It shouldn't just be a civil rights issue by the Justice Department. Let's give people the private right to bring an action against the state for the harm that's been caused. That's actually a terrific idea, and I will look into that. And I do think we can have a constitutional amendment to ban private money into coming into politics, or we could just start by saying that we ban corporate money legislatively.
Yeah, we did that in 1907 with the Tillman Act, and it stood until the Supreme Court struck it down with Citizens United. It's just amazing, you know, the damage that this has done in our country. We have 15 seconds, Congressman. Are you hopeful that these things can be done after the new year, that we'll have a large enough majority to get this stuff through the Senate?
I am. I mean, I think the momentum is there with Fetterman or with Tim Ryan even doing well. I think this Mar-a-Lago stuff hasn't helped Trump. So I'm hopeful that we will build a couple more seats in the Senate, and that will allow us to do a lot more specifically on voting rights.
Yeah, I'm with you. Congressman Ro Khanna, also author of Dignity in a Digital Age, Making Tech Work for All of Us, his new book. Check that out. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Khanna in 60 seconds. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Welcome back. Representative Ro Khanna with us for a few more minutes here, taking your calls. Joe in Mojave, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, gentlemen. It's an honor to speak to both of you. I'm excited about November. I'm also excited to start seeing commercials on my streaming services promoting the Biden administration and everything he's done. I'm also about the U.S. Postal Service. The COVID test kits funding is running out today or tomorrow. And is there anything before the House, or has it already been sent to the Senate? We're not even into cold or flu season yet, and no more kits.
Well, this is because the Senate didn't fund the COVID relief that the administration has wanted. We're going to get this part of the budget continuing resolution. We need to do it, especially with the new booster being approved. And I know we're committed to seeing that done, and you're right to raise that as an issue.
Jeff in Smyrna, Tennessee, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hey guys, how you guys doing today? Listen, I was wondering if there was any movement to lower the Medicare age to 62. I know it would be easier for people to retire if it was 62. I know Bernie wants to go Medicare for all, but if we can do it in steps like 62 and then a couple of years later 55, and then maybe eventually when they realize how it's working, they could do Medicare for all. Is there any chance of getting that done anytime soon?
I would love to. I mean, the president ran on getting Medicare to 60. We need to start expanding Medicare. It's one of the most popular policies. Let's get it to 60 or 62. Let's include dental, vision, hearing, and maybe picking up a couple more senators will make that possible.
Mark, is it Hudson or Salem, Massachusetts?
That would be Hudson, Massachusetts.
Okay, great. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Terrific to get a chance to speak with you, gentlemen. Yes, my question is related to all the revelations about the mishandling of secret documents by our former president. I keep on wondering why we have not heard anything more about his secret conversations with Putin. We know they're going on, and
more than 20 of them.
And I just have not really heard anything on the media back to that, and certainly there's a potential link between the two issues.
Well, I am concerned about not only Trump's conversations with Putin, but conversations that he's been having with foreign leaders. And I agree with you that we need to make sure we first understand on all these documents what he had, what he was doing with it, how much of this information has been compromised. And that's what I think our intelligence agencies are doing right now and trying to figure out.
I'm also curious about that private meeting that Rand Paul did, where he hopped on a plane all by himself. It was secret, flew to Moscow, delivered a package of documents to Vladimir Putin on behalf of Donald Trump. And to this day, nobody knows what was in it. I mean, this is strange goings on. Anyhow, Tony in Houston, Texas, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, I'm a first-time caller.
Thank you, Tony.
For years. I have a question about our protecting our democracy. I've been really concerned lately about will we get any legislation passed to make sure, people that like Trump never get in a position of power. Like the mess we're in now after he got out. I wonder if there's any legislation in the works.
Specifically legislation on
strengthening our democracy so we don't get another wannabe dictator.
Got it. Well, we are taking action. I mean, this is why I said the Electoral Count Act, which would require that states not overturn their popular vote. This is why we need to make sure that we have an independent agency that can prosecute and bring cases for conflict of interest and corruption in the administrative branch, executive branch. And this is why ultimately we need stronger laws requiring disclosure of taxes, financial interests for whoever becomes president.
Percy in Chicago Heights, Illinois. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, I had a question about the Windfall elimination provision. I'm a state worker getting ready to retire and currently receiving Social Security. That is going to be cut. Is anything being done to eliminate that provision?
Yes, there is. Thank you for raising this. This comes up all the time. John Larson has a bill increasing Social Security benefits that also takes care of firefighters, teachers for this provision where people lose benefits if they've been in teaching or in another profession. And we are trying to get a vote on that in the House, and we're pushing to get a vote on it.
Is that the bill that would also end the taxation of Social Security benefits? Or is that a separate piece?
No, that's all a part of John's bill.
Oh, that's great. We should get him on to talk about that. Congressman, we just have 20 seconds left. Final thoughts?
Well, we've made a lot of progress with the biggest climate bill, with the bringing semiconductors back, with the student debt relief. But we're gonna, we need to be out there in the fall. I mean, this is a very consequential election. Imagine the difference between having a couple more senators getting the agenda through, or giving the gavel to Kevin McCarthy and having 2 years of scandal and conspiracy.
There you go. Congressman Khanna, thank you so much for dropping by today. It's great talking with you, and our callers, I know, really appreciate it. Our listeners, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Congressman Ro Khanna, one of the great guys. And check out his new book, Dignity in the Digital Age, or A Digital Age.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back. Dr. Bandy Lee is going to drop by and tell us, oh, she's not. Okay, we'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day. Basically, it's anything goes summer here, last day. We're in this camera, right? 3. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from Chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is Chapter 1. I sit in a living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee meant for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations, I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you. A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical. Superhero exploits, cops and robbers. As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. We become a minority, but becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abrams. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So Mother Jones Magazine got a hold of some leaked audio that was taken of Steve Bannon. He was talking with a group of people on October 31st, 2020. That's in the days prior to the election. Now, at this point, everybody in America who was paying serious attention knew that Trump was going to lose this election. The polls were showing this. I mean, he lost by 7 million votes. You can't bury that. You can't hide that. That's a freight train coming down the road at you. He knew he was going to lose. Bannon knew he was going to lose. And Bannon tells this crowd that Trump is going to declare victory on election night because he knows that a lot of the Democrats didn't want to show up in person at the polls because of COVID, and so they mailed in their ballots. Republicans weren't so concerned, and Trump is going to be ahead. And he's predicting exactly what's going to happen, which raises the question, how well planned was this? It really looks like there's a conspiracy. You can check it out. There's a whole video about it at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. It's Anything Goes Summer, the last day, September 1st. And picking up your phone. Oh, a quick story I wanted to share with you. This is in the news. It's a headline over at, I caught it over at rawstory.com this morning. Apparently, Melania Trump is quite upset that the FBI went through her drawers, her dressing drawers at Mar-a-Lago, looking for top secret documents that might have been squirreled away. They found them stashed in like a half a dozen different places in Mar-a-Lago. So this is not surprising. But now she's so upset that she has bought an entire new set of underwear. Seriously. One of her spokespeople said she hates people touching her, and she certainly doesn't want to put on lingerie that FBI agents have had their hands all over. Right, those filthy FBI agents. Does America need to buy all new underwear after having Donald Trump as president for 4 years? I mean, and not just underwear. Frankly, we need to buy a new government. Well, not buy. We need a new government. We need a reboot here in America. Alrighty, let's pick up your phone calls. Ernesto in in Miami, and I put him on the wrong hybrid, Sean. He's on hybrid 2. Hey, Ernesto, what's on your mind today?
Work to repeat itself?
Ernesto?
No.
No. Ernesto is not listening to his phone, so let's try John in Phoenix. John, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey, Tom, I got a couple quick questions for you. And by the way, thank you so much for educating us every day, Monday through Friday.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
You're amazing. Hey, my question is, how come when you apply for jobs as a civilian, we have a background check, but when you're going to be when you want to run for president of the United States, there's no background check at all, and if enough criminals vote for you, you win? I think that is a totally wrong system. Even the FBI, law enforcement, you have to have a background check. So I was curious on the answer on that. My second thing I want to say real quick, and I'll take everything off the air, and I'll listen to you. I did call the January 6th committee, and I suggested to them that they do investigate Mark Zuckerberg because he obviously took profit over democracy by allowing Trump and his terrorist friends to, set everything up for January 6th. And then my very last thing is I spoke to you about it 2 months ago. I don't have Twitter, but I would love for you to get Glenn Kirshner, or however you say his last name, Glenn Kirshner, on your show. He's really been digging into Donald Trump, and I think he'd be a great person for you to have on.
Okay. Thank you, John. I'm trying to remember John's first point. Security clearances. One of the reasons why I ask you to state a one question. The reason why we don't want to have the federal government or anybody other than the voters and the media and a free, and a presumably free press. The reason why we don't want to have the federal government vet our politicians, including people running for president, is because government, like any other, human endeavor, any other agency, any other process, is corruptible. I mean, just think about it for a minute. If Donald Trump was president, and if he had stacked the commission, let's say that the Congress created a commission or an agency, or there was an agency within the FBI whose job was to vet people running for president, and Trump was president, and Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders came along, and I mean, would you trust the FBI saying, if they came out and said, oh no, Bernie Sanders, for his wedding anniversary, they went to Russia, which is true, by the way. What they did was Bernie was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont at the time, and they have a sister city in Russia. It's a little town in western Russia. And so Bernie and his new wife went there for their anniversary. I mean, it was like kind of a sweet thing that was also tied into his being mayor of Burlington, Vermont. But, if Trump's agency that vets presidential candidates came out and said, oh, no, you can't have Bernie, he's a security risk, and here's our rationale, that's why it's up to the voters. The problem, what happened in 2016, frankly, is, number one, I don't think anybody had realized, many people had realized, but the impact of social media, the power of Facebook was so great, and the cost to corrupt and exploit Facebook was so low that the Russians were able to use Facebook to basically make Donald Trump president. And throughout that process, Paul Manafort was sending internal campaign polling data to Russian intelligence during the 2016 election. He's now admitted this. And Russian intelligence then was using that information to buy on Facebook. You can buy, okay, I want people in this particular town in this particular state. So, hey, we need to jack up the vote in Wisconsin, or we need to jack up the vote in this town in Texas, or whatever. And you can micro-target like that. And it's not just Facebook. You can do it across the media, but most of their efforts were on Facebook at the time. So number one, that was not considered. And number two, and I think probably even more important, because Facebook doesn't necessarily have an obligation to determine whether Donald Trump is a Russian agent or asset or not, although, frankly, I think they really dropped the ball in 2016. But number two, our media as a whole, I mean, Les Moonves really illustrated this hugely when he came out and said to a stockholders meeting, Donald Trump may be terrible for America, but he's making millions of dollars for CBS. Keep it up, Donald. And it's like the remark I made earlier. Donald Trump is this generation's O.J. Simpson. You got a high-profile star who's going through a crisis, and the media is all over it. Well, it was the same thing in 2016. Although it wasn't a crisis, it was a presidential election. But you had a media star, and therefore the media was all over Donald Trump because he was a TV star. And NBC had him on the air for 14 years, and they had paid millions to of media consultants to teach him how to do good television, and he was very good at it. And so they were looking at the dollars rather than at democracy. Hopefully that doesn't happen again, but I don't think the solution to that is to have our government vet our candidates. I think the solution to that is to have more competition in our media, to break up some of the giant media and have bring competition back, and support more independent media in the United States. like this program. Selfless or shameless plug. But that's where I think we need to go. Michael in Wheeling, Illinois. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to say I thought your piece the other day on how fundamentally unfair the Senate is was really eye-opening.
Thank you. Yeah, yesterday's article.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you about is the filibuster in the Senate. Like a lot of people, I feel that is, fundamentally undemocratic. But I'm wondering if you have any concerns that eliminating the filibuster would allow a future Republican Party that controls the presidency, the Senate, and the House to reduce or eliminate Social Security and Medicare benefits.
I believe that's a possibility, Michael, and it frankly does not concern me, and here's why. And this is why I think that when the Democrats say it's time to end the filibuster, I completely agree with them, although I realize not all of them are saying that, which is why we still have the filibuster. And that is that I believe in democracy. I believe in the American people. And I don't think that we need to be protected from either political party by the filibuster, frankly. I mean, if the Republicans did take control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and substantial control, there is a good chance that they would try to destroy Social Security. When the last time that they had control of all three branches was in 2005, and George W. Bush was president, and they privatized Medicare. Half of Medicare now is privatized. Private policies, they call them Medicare Advantage, but they're not Medicare. They're private policies where you get screwed by these big insurance companies. And so, your vision actually happened, or partly happened. And, the response to that is for the American people to push back and say, no, we don't want those people in power anymore. And yes, we do want change. And now you've got Democrats working on legislation to say that these companies can no longer use the word Medicare and to dial back some of these programs, these so-called advantage programs. It's a risk I'm willing to take, Michael. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Thank you very much. And I just, this idea, and the Republicans pitch it to Democrats, frankly, right? You want to keep us, obstructing all your legislation, even though you love your legislation, because then you can obstruct us when we get in power, because we'll do really crazy stuff. Except that the three times that we've carved, two of the three times we've carved exceptions to the filibuster, it was Mitch McConnell who did it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
I mean, Mitch McConnell blew up the filibuster to get Amy Coney Barrett and Beer Bong Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. And welcome back. Dave in Auburn, California. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
I got two things. The first thing is kudos to me, kudos to you, and kudos to Harry Litman. I think about 4 weeks ago I called in and recommended that Biden fire all these general inspectors from the IRS and whatnot. And then 2 days later, I think it was a Wednesday, you made like a 5-minute rant. And then on Thursday or Friday, Harry Litman almost copied what you said on NBC or CNN or one of them. And I just thought he had to be listening to you or me.
I'm sorry, I don't know who he is. Is he a reporter or a commentator or?
Harry Lipman, he's a ex-federal prosecutor.
Oh, okay, cool. So he was a commentator.
He's on all these talk shows all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good on him.
And my second thing is I'd like to have you start an informal bumper sticker contest.
Okay.
My favorite is from Jim Hightower. When we all do better, we all do better. Brought to you by the Democratic Party. But if you,
I like it.
But if you're this is the other ones about the Republicans. When the Republicans win, the climate loses. When the Republicans win, the billionaires win. I mean, that's kind of simple stuff. But you got a lot of listeners. Maybe they could think of something better than I can.
Yeah.
So anyway, great show, and kudos to you and Harry Lipman.
Well, you know, we've got a regular listener, Ziggy, in Oneonta, New York, who has started a little business at his house, manufacturing bumper stickers, buttons, and T-shirts. And his website is endbribes.com. And he has a link on there where you can email him directly and make suggestions for bumper stickers and buttons and things. And I'm guessing he will custom make them for you, too. I shouldn't speak on behalf of him, but my recollection is that he said that at one point. So, Dave, check that out, endbribes.com. I think you may find it interesting.
Okay, great. Keep up the good work. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. There was something, I just have about a minute here. Oh, I wanted to share this with you. This is a big deal. In Michigan, and then I'll pick up your phone calls on the other side of that, but I just didn't want to take a caller in such a short period of time. In Michigan, there is this election board. It's a 4-member board. It has 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And they decide, basically anything having to do with elections. Anything that's in dispute goes to this board for resolution. And over 700,000 Michiganders, 753,759 to be specific, signed a petition saying that they want on the ballot a constitutional amendment guaranteeing reproductive freedom, including the right to an abortion in Michigan. Because right now, Michigan, it's in abeyance because of a judge, but that may not hold, has a 1931 law that bans all abortion under all conditions, period, world without end, amen. And this is very popular. And these 2 Republicans on this board said, typographically, there's not enough space between the words in the ballot measure, and therefore they're going to keep it off the ballot. They have no objection to what it says. Well, obviously, their entire objection is to what it says. But, keep an eye on this one, because I think they're just pissing off the Democrats in Michigan. I think it's going to backfire. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, how are you doing today, and what new math do you have for us?
I wanted to point out the fact that our student debt problem basically started in the year 2000. That's when George W. Bush only saw 1 million jobs created in 8 years, after Bill Clinton has seen 23 million jobs created in 8 years. So we have about 3 to 4 million people graduating from college every year. And every time the Republicans are in the White House, they see a very low number of jobs created, or no jobs, like in the case of Trump. Trump lost 3 million jobs, and George H.W. Bush only saw 2 million jobs created. So you have this situation where when the Democrats are in the White House, the economy, the system, everything works. Every time the Republicans get in the White House, the system falls apart. So the 16 years that the Republicans were president, when they saw basically 0 jobs created, those college grads were still getting out of school, still seeking jobs. And yet, and by the same token, we still have people crossing our border. So basically what happened when the Republicans are in the White House, Americans lose jobs because there's still people coming across the border and getting jobs. Right. And the high-quality jobs are not going to the college grads. They're going to McDonald's, and they're taking jobs from people who don't have high school diplomas or who just have a high school diploma.
Right.
So this whole situation about the jobs, about the students not being able to pay their loans off is because they're not getting jobs when they get out of college, when Republicans are in the White House. Ronald Reagan did say it right. The government is part of the problem, only when Republicans are in the White House.
Yeah, I think you pointed out that 9 out of the last 10 recessions happened under Republican presidents.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you go back for 126 years, they've had the White House 17 times and they gave us 18 recessions.
Wow.
So we have this situation where Reagan was right. When you're talking about Republicans, government is the problem, is not the solution. But when the Democrats get in there, it seems like the system starts to work again. And then the Republicans scam their way in, like Donald Trump did, scam their way in, like George W. Bush. In this case, the Supreme Court gave that loser the White House.
Right.
And he saw 1 million jobs created in 8 years. After Clinton saw 23 million. And then you have, so when you add up the numbers, I get this 44 million jobs created under the Democrats in the last 34 years. That's Bill Clinton with 23 million, Obama with 11 million, and now Biden has seen 10 million. You add that up, it's 44 million jobs.
Wow. Wow.
Versus
Larry,
0 for the Republicans.
Larry, I love it. The Thom Hartmann Program's official math guide. Larry from Los Angeles. Larry, thank you so much.
Okay.
Always great talking to you. Lewis in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Hey, Lewis, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Great show. I love it.
Thank you.
There was a gentleman who said, why don't we have background checks for the president, right? And I did have a few law classes, but I'm not, sure exactly what the thing is. But I think that what would happen is you get a guy like Obama, right? And they would scam and figure out a way to say that he's a criminal in some way, right?
That was my concern.
They make up a story. Right. So I don't know if you mentioned that, but the reason why is that the government, it's a control mechanism. The government cannot stop the people. They can't figure out a way to stop you from electing who you want in office. And the negative part is, yeah, right. And so the negative part is that there's all these negatives, right? Just like you're innocent until proven guilty, right? Obviously, Trump is guilty of a million things. You know what I mean? He should be in jail for like 300 years. But
he hasn't had a trial yet.
Worse possible.
Yeah. But so are you agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, Lewis, that we should not have a federal agency that vets people, that's the job of the media and the voters and the opposition political party? Frankly, I think that the Democratic Party really dropped the ball, in the Clinton campaign in 2016 on outing Donald Trump.
You can't have like a You can't have like George W. Bush do or Trump do a background check on Biden. Imagine if Trump's government did a background check on Biden. I mean,
Hillary
what would it be? Or Hillary Clinton. Exactly. And that's the whole point, is that we have to be in charge of that. Now, there's controls against us, too. But everything has a control, and that's the important one.
Okay.
Because they will block whatever group they don't like.
I completely
they will make
get
sure
it.
a Muslim can't get in and make something
Lewis,
up.
I get it. And I got another caller here, Eric in Seattle, who wants to weigh in on this very topic. So let's, Lewis, thank you for your contribution. Eric in Seattle, your thoughts. It says here you disagree with me.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
I just, I would say, let me just step back just a little bit here. Did you mention that the press would be one of the institutions that could vet?
I think the whole yes, the vetting of political candidates should be left up to opposition parties and the media. That's how our system is set up, and I agree with it.
Okay, so
and any random person. I mean, if you had some information, Eric, on Donald Trump back in 2016, and you wanted to make it public and could figure out a way to get it out there, you could do it too.
Yeah, but the problem we had with Trump getting elected was the financial aspect of these large corporations.
Oh yeah,
I know that.
But that doesn't have anything to do with this argument.
In a way, it does, because it does influence public opinion. And if they're giving airwave time to politicians or people who truly should not have any, just for the sake of money, they're really not doing a service to the people, and it's in violation of the Constitution.
I agree, but that is not an argument for a federal agency to provide a security clearance, essentially, to candidates for public office.
I think I think our overall system, from the courts to the Electoral College, just to the way people are educated in regards to civics and people who are running for office, it really needs an overhaul. It needs a lot of money investment into it so that we can get people up to speed, educated, and be able to make good decisions.
I'm with you there, Eric. I'm absolutely with you. Bring back civics education. Eric, thank you for the call. We'll continue the conversation. I got to tell you about what's going on in Michigan. I mentioned it briefly during a break, and you know, but basically it's anything goes summer here. We'll be right back with your calls.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his chapter on voter suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in American politics right now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000, in which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general, and of strict ones in particular, accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting or restrictions on registration or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently invoke the GOP's use of these tactics, often justifiably, to raise money and to galvanize turnout. This narrative contains some important truths. Some of the forms that these restrictions on voting access have taken in recent years are diabolically obvious in their efforts to keep constituencies supportive of Democrats from voting. Still others boast the distinction of being more insidiously designed and thus less obvious in their intentions. The book is An Uncivil War by Greg Sargent of The Washington Post.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. Right now down in Florida, a federal judge appointed by Donald Trump They were judge shopping. They found this one particular judge that they thought would be most favorable to Trump. And she is a right-wing crank, but, hey, you never know. Sometimes when people get a lifetime appointment to the federal bench, they leave behind their crazy. Sometimes they amplify it, but we'll find out. But the Trump folks are arguing that the FBI and the Department of Justice should not have sole authority over these documents and these top secret documents that Trump had stolen from the White House and was hiding down in Mar-a-Lago. And we have not yet heard the decision. And Trump is asking for this special master, which would be a third party who would come in and go through all the documents and decide if any of them were covered by attorney-client privilege, if they involve correspondence between Trump and his lawyers. It's a pretty thin soup, as it were. It's a very weak argument. And he's also making the argument that he has executive privilege, which he does not have. He cannot assert that. He's no longer president. But he's trying to make that argument as well. I think personally his lawyers are just doing what he's telling them to do. And I think that some of them have put themselves in considerable legal jeopardy as a result. But we'll see how that shakes out. And also in Michigan, you've got a 700 and... Let me get the right number here. 753,759 Michiganders, people in Michigan, signed a petition to put onto the ballot an amendment to the Michigan Constitution that would guarantee reproductive rights, including the right to birth control and the right to abortion. 753,000 people. Now, they only needed a couple 100,000 signatures. They have way more than they needed. This is overwhelmingly popular. It will almost certainly pass. It does, however, because it's going on the ballot, it has to go through this elections commission, which has 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on it, whose job is to just make sure if there's any dispute about anything on a ballot, that they make the decision. And the 2 Republicans on this elections board for the state of Michigan are saying that the language of the ballot measure is fine, the signatures are fine, the people want it, all that's good, but typographically, the letters are too close to each other. There's not enough space between the words, and therefore it should be kept off the ballot. Now, Democrats are suing. They're taking this to the Michigan Supreme Court. We'll see what happens. I'm guessing that the court will probably say, the will of the people is more important than typographic errors and strike down what the Republicans are trying to do, but you never know. But either way, the fact that they're going to the mat on this, and this is big news in Michigan. If you live in Michigan, this is all over the media. This has got to be the kind of thing that causes, another 100,000 women to sign up to vote and their allies. I think this is going to just backfire big time. Anyhow, last day of Anything Goes summer here. Blake in Simi Valley, California. Blake, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted your opinion on something. It's regarding the Senate representation. Came out a couple years ago I saw it on NPR and Washington Post. If current domestic migration trends continue, which they've been going on since we first created cities as humans, people move from rural areas to cities. By 2040, it's predicted 30% of Americans will control 70 senators. Then obviously the inverse of that, 70% of us in the populated areas will only have 30 senators.
Yeah, I wrote about this yesterday at HartmannReport.com. I've got all the numbers and everything, if you want to read it.
And that's not changeable in the Constitution, right? I mean,
that's correct.
The Senate
without an amendment. I mean, you could amend the Constitution, but yeah, it's
okay. You can even amend the Senate structure.
But I think the solution is to do what Abraham Lincoln and Benjamin Harrison and Ulysses Grant did, which is add states.
Right.
I mean, Lincoln in 1864, Lincoln was looking at the probability that when the Democratic states in the South started getting reintegrated into the nation, part of Reconstruction was that they had to rewrite their constitutions, take slavery out of the constitutions, and pledge basically their loyalty to the United States. And when they did that, they could rejoin the Union, and they were slowly coming in one at a time. Now, this was 1864 while the war was still going on, but they knew that this was coming. And he saw that he was, that the Republicans were going to lose control of the Senate if they didn't add at least, one more senator, 2 more senators. And the law at that time required 125,000 people to qualify for a state to have a single member of the House of Representatives. And that was not by law, but it was by tradition considered to be the threshold for statehood. And the Nevada territory only had 7,000 people. They didn't meet that 125,000 person threshold. But Lincoln pushed it through anyway. Lincoln and the Republicans in the House and Senate said, we're going to add Nevada as a state because they needed 2 more Republican senators. And then, 14 years later, I guess it was, or I can't do math in my head that fast, 22 years later, in 1876, the same thing happened. This was after the Tilden-Hayes race. And it looked like there was a very real possibility that the same thing was going to happen. This was during the election. This was before the actual election happened, and Ulysses Grant was president. And Ulysses Grant added North and South Dakota, as I recall. Ulysses Grant added Colorado. That was it. That was Grant. And Colorado had something like 30 or 40,000 people, again below the threshold. And then again in the late 1880s, I forget the year, but it was right after
1890.
Yeah, whatever it was when Benjamin Harrison was president. It was at the end of the presidency of the only Democrat who served during that half decade after the Civil War. When the Republicans took the House and Senate and the White House back again, he didn't just add the Dakota Territory, which is what it was called at the time, and it only had 120,000 people in it. He split it in half into 2 states, North and South Dakota, just to get 4 senators. So, I think that not only should we add Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, I think, frankly, we should add the U.S. Virgin Islands and Guam.
Yeah.
I don't see a solution.
I don't see 70-30 split's pretty damn big.
It is, and it's coming. You're absolutely right. As more and more people move into cities, and as blue states continue to be places where the quality of life is really high, and red states continue to be hellholes, and it's going to get a hell of a lot worse as flooding and drought and wildfires pick up. You're going to see more and more people moving to blue states just for quality of life issues. And frankly, this is a demographic disaster on its way. And like I said, if you want the details, and I encourage you to share this with everybody you know, I wrote about it yesterday at HartmannReport.com. It's the second story on the front page there. You can check it out. Blake, thanks for the call. Jim in West Palm Beach, Florida. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, did you see that Nate Silver prediction about the House elections, next election cycle?
I have not. Tell me about it.
Well, he said that the Republicans were going to win back. And I was just thinking, that...
Win back the House?
Yeah.
When did he say that?
I just saw it. I looked on his website today. I heard about it yesterday. I looked on his website, and he shows exactly the numbers.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, not a good thing. But the other thing is that, and about this win in Alaska, right?
Yeah.
And that how much do you think the ranked choice voting had to do with that? Because that is a red state.
I'm not sure in this age of the Dobbs decision that any red state is as red as we thought it was. But I do believe that ranked choice voting played a huge role in this, because what happened was the people who voted for Mark Begich, who was the Republican in the race, and part of a Republican dynasty. Mark Begich has been in the middle of a pissing war, basically, with Sarah Palin for years. They do not like each other. They trash talk each other, and so for Sarah Palin to get Mark Begich votes, people would have had to make her their second choice. And in order for her to become the new representative, member of the House of Representatives from Alaska, she had to get at least 60% of Begich's second choice votes. And obviously she didn't. And I think it's because of that battle between her and Begich. So in that regard, ranked choice voting, helped out the Democrat. Forgive me for not remembering her name right now. It's a new name to me.
Yeah. She's a Native American.
She is, and it's a wonderful thing. And her campaign, by the way, was all about bringing decency back to politics. Let's work with each other, and let's which is pretty remarkable stuff. But Sarah Palin is whining and complaining that ranked choice voting stole the election from her, et cetera, et cetera. I do believe ranked choice voting played a big role in it, but it played a role in it just by reflecting what was actually going on politically in the state of Alaska. And therefore, I think it's a good thing. Jim, I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's 16 minutes past the hour. It's the last day of Anything Goes summer. Picking up your phone calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Mary Peltola is the new U.S. representative from Alaska. And welcome back, Bob in Desert Hot Springs, California. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, it's really good to have you back. I mean that.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. I was driving Louise nuts. I'm easily bored.
I really missed your show. But anyway, the other day you were talking about education. And I remember back in the day in the early 70s when I went to college, community college for free, I took a course in business management. And I remember it said in there, for the betterment of business and society, healthcare and education should not be for a profit and a loss.
Right, I agree. They should be part of the commons, just like fire and police.
And right, and I remember reading this in a business book.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was conventional wisdom in the United States up until the 70s and 80s when neoliberalism crept in. I mean, this idea that public goods should be done in a way that generates private profit was blasphemous. Dwight Eisenhower would have been horrified by that idea. Even Richard Nixon was largely opposed to it.
Right. I just wanted to bring that up, Tom. That's all.
Yeah, well, you did it, and you did a great job of it. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate the call. Steve in New York City. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, it drives me crazy. I'm at the why. All these old guys that love Trump drive me nuts.
Okay. Tell me about it.
And everybody goes, they say, oh, Trump kept us out of wars. They love Trump. And, and they has Trump is this. They think he's a hero. They think he's like some sort of Superman.
So is your frustration, Steve, that they are, Trump humping, or is your frustration that you have not figured out a way to convince them otherwise or shut them up?
Well, it seems like there's something in their brain, it's like blocking the wheels in their brain from
tribalism,
accepting another thought or something. They can't be convinced. They think Trump's saved America or something.
It's like sports teams. People feel like their identity is wrapped up in their team, in their tribe, in their family, essentially. And so when you challenge the tribe, when you challenge the team, particularly for people who are deeply insecure, who don't have a strong sense of self, you're challenging their sense of self. You're challenging their identity. You're challenging their very existence deep down inside. I mean, they wouldn't articulate it that way, but this is what's going on down inside their lower unconscious brain. Is
but Trump actually was kind of good in a way, kind of like made certain kind of males, like less educated males, feel better about themselves.
Yeah. Exactly.
May have a good high level education. They felt better. Like one guy's a property manager guy, just like didn't have high level education. He felt, and Jim, he felt, he loves Trump.
But see, Joe Biden is reaching out to those people now too. He's reaching out to blue collar workers and people who have a high school diploma or less, and saying, we're here for you too. We want to raise the minimum wage. We want to increase work standards. We want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. He's doing, actually, the things that Trump said he was going to do and never did.
Yeah, I mean, Trump, like, go, all right, all right, we're going to commercial break.
Yeah, we are. Steve, thanks a lot for the call. It's nice to hear from you, and I totally get it, how frustrating it is to talk to Trump humpers. That said, you know, I guess we have to have a little compassion. We'll be right back. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. A fellow over on Twitter, Paul Ferry, put together an amazing Twitter thread with clips from newspapers starting in 1894. In 1894, the newspaper was saying, nobody wants to work anymore. In 1905, nobody wants to work anymore. In 1916, nobody wants to work anymore. The story is a little more than that, but I'm going through this quickly. 1922, what's the cause of unemployment and hard times? Nobody wants to work anymore. 1937, orchardists complain of shortage of labor because nobody wants to work anymore. 1940, nobody wants to work anymore, says the governor of Wisconsin. 1952, nobody wants to work anymore. 1969, Sunday segment on the TV news titled, Nobody Wants to Work Anymore. 1979, and then, you know, he goes to 1981 and 1999 and 2006 and 2014 and 2022. Yeah, we've been hearing this for a long time. There's a whole video clip about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. 22 minutes past the hour. Steve in Northampton, Massachusetts. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom.
Hey, Steve. What's up?
If you want to win the 2022 and 2024 elections, I have the most important thing to say to you today.
I'm listening.
Donald Trump manipulated the entire world's oil market in April of 2020 because big oil was losing money because of COVID.
That's right. There were Texas wildcatters who were going broke, and so Trump went over to Saudi Arabia and cut a deal to reduce production by 2.2 million barrels a day. And it's still there, by the way. That production cut is still in place.
OPEC reduced oil by 9.85 million barrels a day, which was actually more than the entire United States production, which had dropped in COVID to 9.75 million barrels a day.
Wow, I didn't know that number.
If that message gets out, if that message, and the deal was for 2 years, which just ended in May, and gas prices astonishingly dropped over $1 just now.
Yeah.
If you get this message out, if 10 million Americans hear it, Donald Trump and the Republicans passed a law that we would pull all our military out of Saudi Arabia to force them to do this. If you get this message out, if this message gets out, it's over for the Republicans.
Yeah, I've been singing this song for a long time, Steve. I've been pointing out that Trump and Mohammed bin Salman negotiated this, that Trump bent his arm to do it, and he was doing it on behalf of the Texas oil guys. And that's why, you know, because there were all these stickers on pumps, you know, with Biden, I did this, you know, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And no, it was Donald Trump who raised the price of oil back during the COVID time when nobody was using it, airplanes weren't flying, nobody was driving. Price of oil was in the tank. It was down, you know, in the neighborhood of $30 a barrel. And
it was negative, actually.
Yeah, for a short while there. You're absolutely right. Yeah, in the futures markets, and so you know, now you know, the price of oil rebounded as we came back from the recession, you know, from the pandemic. But you know, along with that, did not come the increased production. You're absolutely right, Steve. Thank you for pointing that out. Tom in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Great show. Don't ever retire. I agree with.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with your statement that we should not have a government office vetting candidates for office. We are a self-governing people, of the people, by the people, etc.
Right.
And if we ever did have such an office, we quickly morph into George Orwell's 1984.
I agree. The ultimate sovereign in the United States is and should continue to be we the people. Now, you know, right now you could argue that because of Supreme Court decisions legalizing political bribery, you know, one of the major sovereigns are the billionaires and the right wing and the big corporations. But still, you know, at least in theory, it's we the people. And it needs
That's why I like your show.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tom. Great to hear from you. Nathan in West Los Angeles. Hey, Nathan, we just have a minute. You got a quick one?
You know, I was going to make a comment about that report on the artificial sweeteners.
Yeah.
That you had earlier this week.
Yeah,
I've had one of those only once. I think it was the stevia. My parents were cold turkey off sugar for a brief period, and my mom was making desserts with the stevia. I had like 2 brownies. It tore me up. I was in the bathroom for like 90 minutes. It was like I had food poisoning. It was so weird.
Yeah, no, these artificial sweeteners, they alter the way your body functions, and they alter the way that your body metabolizes sugar, and that's like not a good thing.
No, super weird. Yeah. My wife is a microbiologist, PhD microbiologist, and she's constantly going on about gut health. And when COVID went through my house, shortly after vaccinations, my mom was the only person to not get it at any point, even though we were all in close proximity for a while. She credits it to her gut health because she takes probiotics and all kinds of other things and really takes care of it.
Could be. That's essential stuff. And again, the artificial sweeteners screw up your microbiome, your gut. Yeah.
Bacteria. One more quick comment about that. My wife, being from Taiwan originally, Chinese medicine, lots of herbal supplements. She's an acupuncturist. They can prescribe real great gut.
Yep. I'm a believer in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. Yes, I'm with you. Nathan, thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In fact, I studied TCM for a month in Beijing, China, at the Beijing International Acupuncture Institute back in '86. I love it. Today, we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his chapter on voter suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in American politics right now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000. In which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, Several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general and of strict ones in particular accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting or restrictions on registration or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently invoke the GOP's use of these tactics, often justifiably, to raise money and to galvanize turnout. This narrative contains some important truths. Some of the forms that these restrictions on voting access have taken in recent years are diabolically obvious in their efforts to keep constituencies supportive of Democrats from voting. Still others boast the distinction of being more insidiously designed and thus less obvious in their intentions. The book is An Uncivil War by Greg Sargent of The Washington Post. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. It's 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hey, Tom. I wanted to address the question of psychological profile of a president, someone who's running. And if I were president or I'm running for president, I would voluntarily take the Army psychological exam because I'm going to be the commander-in-chief. And I would start that as a precedent for others to follow. And I don't think Trump could have passed that test.
That's interesting. I'm completely unfamiliar with this. Can you tell me anything about it?
To get into the military, you have like to get into a police department, you have to pass a psychological test. It's like the guy who shows up and says, "I want to kill," and see blood run, whatever it is. He doesn't get in the Army, and so they have that control. I also had a geeky question that I've been dying to ask.
Go for it.
Okay. Do you know the sequel, the first sequel to the first feature-length movie?
I don't.
It's called The Fall of a Nation.
Is it a sequel to Birth of a Nation?
Exactly. There were one or two short films before that. One was called The Little Train Robbery. But the sequel deals with the opposition to the pacifism from Ford and William Jennings Bryan, and it's
World War
1916.
Yeah,
Huh?
you're talking about the opposition to World War I.
To getting into the war, 1916,
Right.
the plot is about the European Confederate Army invading the United States.
Amazing.
And starts by executing children and veterans, and then a millionaire collaborator accepts the title of Prince of the puppet government. And then a pro-war congressman who raises an army to defeat the invaders with the support of suffragette, who has an army of women who seduce men and kill soldiers.
That's incredible.
Anyway.
Now, for people who don't know what you and I are talking about here, Bill, Birth of a Nation was the first nationwide theater release, big-scale movie. It was screened in the White House by President Woodrow Wilson, and it was a recruiting film for the Ku Klux Klan. And it was about what happened during Reconstruction when black people were elected to public office down south, and it shows them, with their feet up on the tables eating watermelon and stuff. And I mean, it's just so racist. It's just insane. But it was also a silent movie. Was the sequel a silent movie as well?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, it was 1916.
Yeah.
I think it had I think there was a symphony music background that was written or something, but I think it was a silent movie. But it's an interesting, different set of ideas that were going on.
Fascinating stuff. I'd heard about Birth of a Nation, for much of my life, and I'd never actually seen it. And I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, it was we were living in Portland, because I remember doing a show about this when we were at the old KPOJ studio. Louise and I watched it. I don't recall where we found it, if it was on YouTube or what, but we watched this, Birth of a Nation. And I was just like my jaw was on the floor. I mean, this is so racist, and this is so explicit, and this is a friggin' recruiting film for the Klan. And it wasn't being characterized as such. Instead, it was just famous as being the first big movie, and it was like one of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer people or something. It was. I forget it was a Daryl. Who was the guy who produced it? He was like.
It was Doug Griffith.
D.W. Griffith, that's right. And, a huge, major movie maker. And he went on to become a huge, and a very, very wealthy man. But you watch that movie today, and it's like, holy cow, what an insight into white racism in 19 whatever it was when that came out, Right. It was incredible.
And when I was in college, I earned credits I was in the film school by being a projectionist. I had to watch that film about 10 times.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking about.
I had to project it.
I get it. Bill, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. Thank you. Danny in Santa Monica. Hey, Danny, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? I'm glad your back's better.
Thank you. Yeah, it is considerably. I haven't taken any pain pills in a day and a half, so.
All right, buddy. The suspenders, Larry King's younger brother.
Well, I think I'll be able to put a belt on next week, I hope.
Okay, good, buddy. Hey, I have a question. I'm a bartender at a private club, and a lot of the people are complaining that they paid off their student loans, and they're the parents that paid off the student loans. And I had an idea, and I just thought maybe you could tell me what you think. Say you make under $150,000 a year, you would be eligible for whatever the amount that you borrowed for the length of time that you borrowed, a free interest, a free loan from the government that you then can do with what you want for the same amount, a 5-year, 15-year, whatever, 10 grand, whatever you might have borrowed. And then at the end of that, you either pay back the exact amount, then you can use that money to make money, or you then pay a low interest rate loan, because I've seen commercials during sporting events where they're targeting people that, they're mad and angry of people that, are getting this quote unquote free money, which I'm just thinking, how can we try to make these people not so upset and offer them a reward for being good people who paid off their loans and they were, honest. And so obviously they're a good credit risk. I don't know. It's just throwing out an idea out there. And I thought maybe you could show me any flies in the ointment, and glad you're back, buddy.
Thank you, Danny. No, I get your point. I would argue that your rebuttal or solution or response to these folks is buying into their frame. The frame that they're coming out of with these kind of complaints is that a wrong was done by paying off people's student loans. And because I paid my student loan, that wrong was done to me. And I would flip that upside down. And I would say the wrong was done to you. You're absolutely right. By the need for the student loan that you already paid off. You were the one who was screwed by Ronald Reagan. You know, good on you for paying back your loan. But, you know, prior to Ronald Reagan, college in the United States was functionally free. I mean,
and most of these guys probably did pay very little or, you know, small amounts.
Exactly.
And
so
it's hard to
I
get
was
them to change.
Yeah, no, I get that. But so my point would be that paying off student loans is righting a wrong. And that you were a victim of that wrong as well. And now, you know, there's not a way to compensate you for that, unfortunately. And but, you know, you were the victim of Reagan. These people with student loans are the victims of Reaganomics or Reaganism. And, you know, we're starting to make it right. And this is the starting point.
One of the guys at Barton is a teacher for 15 years. He still has to work 2 nights a week. He's paying them off. And he makes okay money here in California, you know, but ultimately, you know, I feel like he could maybe get some interest-free loan that, I don't know, I just feel like that these people could.
I think we need to zero out all student debt across the nation. I mean, it's only $1.5 trillion. That is less than Donald Trump's tax cut for billionaires. If Donald Trump can give $1.5 trillion tax cut to billionaires, we can do $1.5 trillion in debt forgiveness, and it'll be just fine. The country did not collapse when Donald Trump gave all that money to billionaires. You know, it won't collapse if we zero out student loans. And then we need to go back. Prior to Reagan, 80% of the cost of tuition was paid for, or the cost of a college, of going to college, 80% of that cost was paid by state and federal governments. And 20% was paid by tuition. Today, the numbers are the exact opposite. Today, 80% of the cost of college is paid for with tuition, and 20% is subsidized by state and federal grants. We need to go back to that 80-20. We need to reverse back to the 80-20 we had pre-Reagan and make college affordable again and do it as soon as possible. Danny, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, welcome back. I'm actually not in Portland. I'm on vacation, a little unplugged, but glad you're on the mend. And I wanted to talk about taxing private equity, but let me just read a quote from Robert Reich earlier this month in regard to that. He said, skyrocketing housing costs, a broken healthcare system, and a decaying media, it can all be tied back to one thing, private equity. The industry is getting rich by making your life more expensive and bankrolling politicians who do their bidding.
It's true.
And, you know, Tom, you talked about how private equity donated about $500,000 to Sinema's campaign.
Yep.
This election cycle. Well, she wasn't running, but
and then she got stripped out of the Inflation Reduction Act, a provision that would have caused private equity people to pay the same rate of income taxes as the rest of us.
Well, yeah. All told, she and the GOP, and just with regard to this new IRA, saved private equity $49 billion. If you break it down, $14 billion by not closing the carried interest loophole, and $35 billion for exempting them from the new 15% corporate minimum tax. So $500,000 investment, and they reaped a $49 billion reward. Not too shabby. So, you know, Tom, I think we progressives really need to introduce a new bill, to claw back that $49 billion and put it toward affordable housing and child care, et cetera, et cetera. I gave a stat to Jefferson when he was filling in, and I think I got it wrong when I said it. But in 2020, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, they did a study, and they found whenever there's a $100 increase in median rent, there's a subsequent 9% rise in homelessness. And you know that's a huge issue on the West Coast and Oregon in particular.
Yep.
So. What do you think? And is Tina Kotek taking on that issue as strongly as she should be?
She is not. It troubles me considerably that Betsy Johnson is doing a really good job of kind of essentially talking tough around homeless issues. And Tina Kotek has been kind of dancing a lot more carefully. And I think she needs to be a lot more explicit about these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm out of state right now, but I'm a little worried that it's going to be like how Trump co-opted the fair trade, the free trade.
I think it's possible we're going to end up with a Republican governor because you've got Betsy Johnson, who's no longer a Democrat. running as an independent, and she's going to split the vote. She's going to take a good chunk of Tina Kotek's votes away, the Democrat. Otherwise, Tina would walk away with it. I mean, she was a really good Speaker of the House, but Betsy Johnson has got all this money from Phil Knight, the billionaire who started Nike, and from the billionaire who started Columbia Sportswear. I forget his name.
Well, yeah, and Knight is he funded the last Republican in 2018 running for governor too.
Yeah, of course. And this way, he doesn't have to fund a Republican and take all the crap. Yeah. He's funding a former Democrat. And when I lived in Vermont, we saw this exact same thing. Tony, I'm forgetting his last name, but he was with the Progressive Party in Vermont, and they split the vote with the Democrat. And for 2 election cycles, we had a Republican governor in a blue state because this progressive kept getting on the ballot. Jeff, I got to run. But thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You'd think people would people have figured this out. Obviously, the billionaires have figured this out. We'll be right back. It's 46 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. James in Sitka, Alaska. Hey, James, I've been to Sitka. It's a beautiful town. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. How you doing?
Good. What's up?
Hey, you had it wrong there a little bit there. Like the current Nick Begich who ran in Alaska against Sarah, he is a Republican.
Right.
Now, okay, Nick Begich, his father, Nick Begich, was a Democrat, and also was his uncle. He was. They were Democrats.
Oh, okay. So when I said he was a part of the Republican dynasty, I was wrong. It was a political dynasty, not a Republican one. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually, it's interesting because doing the choice voting, the ranked choice voting, I didn't put a second person on there. I didn't check a second person. I just checked a Mary Peltola. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people did that because they were both Republicans, So
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway.
So, okay. Well, thank you, James. Thank you for that. I truly appreciate it. And good to know. Patrick in Chicago. Hey, Patrick. Thanks for listening on the Thom Hartmann app. What's up?
How's it going, Tom? Yeah, you guys were talking last week, I think, about year-round school. And my idea was to implement a field trip program to help fill up some of that time, maybe in the summer, where the kids can vote on which national park they want to visit. And then they could visit that national park and stay there for 3 weeks, learn all about the national park, our climate, our commitment to national parks and all that. And, that should help
what a cool idea.
Some of that time. Yeah. So I was just reading this news report about this kid who was taking his grandma to see all the national parks. I'm like, we should make all the kids do that.
Yeah. The question would be, how do you pay for it,
Well, yeah, that's a good point. We'd have to, reinvest massively in education, but hopefully with the Blue Wave, we can do that.
There you go. I hope, from your lips to God's ears, Patrick. Patrick, thanks a lot for the call. Roger in Forest City, Iowa. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hey, Tom. Hope your back's doing better. I have a broken back, too, so I know how it feels.
Okay.
But I called and kind of talked to you about this before. A lot of pretty much all of our national security, where we have these documents and stuff, they polygraph the people that work there. And I kind of talked to you about it before. Now, all these people that were in Mar-a-Lago, if they were on film, they should be polygraphed because there is a chance that they saw these papers.
Yeah, my understanding is that the Trump organization or Mar-a-Lago or Donald or whatever is saying that a lot of that security footage that we would need to know, over the last 18 months, who went in and who accessed these documents has just kind of mysteriously gone missing. Not available. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. But they should polygraph Trump, too.
Yeah, I'm with you.
He's a civilian that had a chance to look at that.
Once they put him in prison, they should polygraph him.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is a real mess, Roger. Our national security at risk. I want to know what were the documents that Rand Paul carried over to Moscow to hand deliver to Vladimir Putin on Donald Trump's behalf. I mean, that I think is the most underreported story of 2018 that he did that. That was a big deal. Roger, thank you for the call. You know, was Rand Paul delivering a list of our spies to Putin? Was he delivering the nuclear codes to Putin? Was he delivering our first strike or our nuclear response plans? What was it that Donald Trump asked Rand Paul to take and give to Vladimir Putin? Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. Hey, we've got a special report here. This is from a John Robbins piece called Realities for the 90s. The amount of soy grown in the U.S. consumed by livestock, 90%. The amount of corn grown in the U.S. consumed by livestock, 80%. How frequently a child on Earth dies as a result of malnutrition or starvation, every 2.3 seconds. The amount of total United States grain production consumed by livestock, 70%. The amount of U.S. grain exports consumed by livestock, 66%. The number of children who die as a result of starvation every day, 38,000. The amount of the world grain harvest consumed by livestock throughout the 1980s, half. The number of people who will die as a result of malnutrition and starvation this year, 20 million. The number of people who could be nourished with the nutritional value of the grain used to produce meat, 7. And it goes on from there. There's a whole video that summarizes all this stuff that you can find over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. At 52 minutes past the hour, welcome back. John in Valley Springs. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how's it going, Tom?
Good. What's up?
I got a couple of things. One,
pick one.
You got to laugh out of this. Where's all these women that Donald Trump said was getting raped that coming across the border? That was when he was running for office. And the other one was Mexico has extremely large oil reserves underground.
Right.
And I really think we ought to look into maybe working with our neighbor country down there and see what we can set up to try to get away from Saudi Arabia. I think that would help us a lot. And
yeah, they would have to.
They would have to do it. I think the transition moving to electoral power is great.
Yeah, I agree. They would have to do a lot of development of their oil down there. Pemex has historically been which is the Mexican oil company, has and it's gone on and off again. And I'm frankly not sure of its status now, but it's been private, then it's been public, then it's been private, then it's been public. The place where there's a pile of oil that's easily accessible and there is the infrastructure to pump it out right now, wouldn't require much of an investment, is in Venezuela. And frankly, I think if we were to drop our embargoes on Venezuela and embrace that country, there's a good chance that we could bring them into the family of nations, as it were.
I think a little heavier investment into talking with those people would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the right-wing policies have not been good for this country or Venezuela. Mary Ellen in Chicago. Hey, Mary Ellen, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to call really quick to say that I wanted to correct a piece of misinformation because I didn't want your listeners to walk away with this. I was a real food activist and GMO-free activist for years. And one of your previous callers, I'm glad that artificial sweeteners are on your radar and antidepressants, and there's a huge connection between the two. But anyway, the artificial sweeteners, one of your previous callers said he had this, bad experience with one, and he thought it was stevia his mother was, cooking or baking with. Mm-hmm. And I just want to correct that. Stevia is the only natural, it's not the only, but is the major natural sugar alternative.
Yeah, it's a plant extract. You're absolutely right about that, Mary Ellen. But last week I did a Geeky Science here where I shared a several peer-reviewed scientific studies that were looking at 4 artificial sweeteners, and stevia was one of those 4. Aspartame, stevia, and I'm forgetting the names of the other 2, but they were all ones that you'd be familiar with. And while stevia didn't produce some of the consequences, and I'm not, pardon me, 2 of them were producing changes in blood sugar metabolism and changes in gut bacteria, and 2 of them were just producing changes in gut bacteria. And stevia was one of the less destructive ones, but stevia was also, and I forget which of the changes it was producing, but stevia was also working in a way that was not good for people. As much as
thank you for educating me on that. But I just wanted to correct. It's not artificial. But right. it may not be. Thank you for educating me on that. I do want to throw in, as long as I got you, that the connection, though, that with aspartame, if you look at the history, it's insane. It was originally under G.D. Searle in Chicago, did not get passed because of cancer-causing agents, and when Donald Rumsfeld took over that company,
right.
So you know the history.
Yeah, Rumsfeld was the guy who pushed that through.
Yes, exactly.
And he got rich doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And they, as soon as Reagan, was inaugurated. So, and then the connection when they were putting that into the food supply, because it does aspartame, it aggravates the glutamate receptors in the brain, and what soothes that as a Band-Aid are Prozac in that class.
Yeah. Sadly. Mary Ellen, I got to run, but thank you for the call. And thank you for being with us today. Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires every single one of us. We are the demos in democracy, the people. And if we don't act, we don't have a democracy. So double check your voter registration, especially if you live in a red state. But even in blue states, Republicans can challenge your voter registration. It can get pulled and you don't even know it. Double check it. Get out there. Get active. Tag. You're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and stay safe.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!